That's the story on that, but he was a cad.
Oh, he was. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to speak for you in this sense. He murdered Sharon, his wife, fourth wife, and he shot his mother-in-law. I forget now. Did she die or no? She didn't die. I didn't think so. Yes.
She didn't see very well.
Yes. Yeah.
He hit her in the head, and she was in the hospital at Baptist. They brought her over here because they took Sharon to Ouachita Hospital in Hot Springs, and she lived an hour after she was shot. She was shot in the chest.
Hello, I'm Derek Cash with the North Little Rock Public Library System and want to welcome you to Meet the Author. On June 24th, 1966, 13-year-old Cathy Ward was found dead at a ranch and riding stable near Hot Springs, Arkansas. The owner of the stable claimed it was an accident. However, when he committed murder months later, Hot Springs residents were convinced he had also murdered the young girl. Joining us today is Cathy Ward's junior high school classmate, Biddy Martin, with her book, Snake Eyes, Murder in a Southern Town. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's such an honor.
Oh, well, I'm glad you were able to come because you and I both know it has been months since we've been planning and just different situations have prevented it. So I'm finally glad we get to do this because from the very top, I enjoyed your book. So thank you so much. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we begin?
Okay. Well, I'm a Hot Springs native. I graduated from Hot Springs High School in 1970 and went to college. I have 2 college degrees, one in marketing and another one in nursing. And I kind of found my way into becoming an author because of our friend, Cathy Ward, who's the first victim in this book. She's been with us all of our life. And I guess that's kind of my story right there. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I don't want to give any more because I could go on and on and on.
That's perfect. All right. Having brought up Cathy and also in the introduction, what was your relationship with Cathy?
Cathy was a year younger than, I'm a twin, I'm an identical twin, and Cathy was a year younger than Mitzi, my twin, and I. She was good friends with our neighbor, Leslie, who lived across the street from us. And Cathy lived 2 blocks away from us in Hot Springs. And the week that she died, she had been skateboarding over at Leslie's house, and she left her skateboard at her house. And that's kind of how, there's more to the story, but that's our connection. And it's what happened to this skateboard that caused me to decide that I needed to finally tell her story because we never knew what happened to her. She died tragically in a horse accident. She fell off a horse supposedly and was dragged to death in Hot Springs. That's what the ranch owner told the sheriff's department, but that's not what happened. And we were kids back then, and our parents wouldn't talk about it, nor our teachers, so we never really knew what really happened to her. And like you said at the beginning, it wasn't until the ranch owner committed a murder months later that they went back and reinvestigated Cathy's death. And so, but again, we didn't read the newspaper back then. We were in junior high school. Who reads the newspaper in junior high school? Well, we didn't, and we never knew what happened. And then when this area event happened with her skateboard, that was my cue that Cathy wanted her story told.
Okay. About how long did it take you to write the book? And did you get all the information that you wanted in terms of research to get the story?
I'm glad you asked that. I started writing the book in 2014. The first interview was a little girl that Cathy had been skateboarding with and left her skateboard at Cathy's house because that's what tripped the story. The second interview was with Cathy's father, Dr. Hiram Ward. He was a physician in Murfreesboro. Now, Cathy lived in Hot Springs, and her mother moved her and her siblings to Hot Springs when she separated from her father several years before Cathy died. But now I've got to think back to what your original question was.
The research. Were you able to find?
Okay. Yeah. So Dr. Ward was my second interview. Well, at this time, this was 2014. I was an operating room nurse, and I worked all over the country. You've heard about travel nurses. Well, that's what I did, and I did some other special, highly technical gigs that we do around the country where they fly us out and do these special jobs. But so I was working, and I'd fly out to California and spend a few weeks or a month and be back in Hot Springs. So I didn't have a lot of time to be consistent with my research and interviews. So that went on for several years where I'd be home for a few weeks or a month or 2 months, and then I had to fly out again. So it took a long time to write my book and do the research and interview people. And I interviewed over 60 people. Oh, wow. That's a lot.
It is, yes. Now that the book is published, what do people think of it? What have any of the family members, like the Wards, have any of them commented, or anyone else? I'll be quiet and you speak.
Okay, well, Dr. Ward passed away, he passed away last year.
Okay.
2 months after a month after the book came out. So
Okay.
I don't know if he even read it.
All right.
Now, Cathy's little sister, I met at my book signing in May of last year. And there's a story there because I wanted to interview her. But when I was interviewing Dr. Ward in 2014, his third wife told me that Cathy's little sister didn't want to have anything to do with the book. She will not interview with you. So I respected her wishes, and I didn't try to contact her. I wish I would have, because at my book signing, I met Cathy's little sister, and the first thing she said to me, she said, "Who told you I wouldn't interview with you?" And I said, "Well," and I said her stepmother's name. She said, "Yeah." So I missed out interviewing, and that would have been so great. But her little sister is using this book to process the past, and it's helping her to heal. And that's one of the best benefits to come out of the book, I truly believe.
Well, that's a redeeming story. It's really a nice thing to hear that a book can bring therapeutic purposes to a person's life. So
not only to her, but also to Frank Davis, the murderer's son. Same thing.
Wow. Wow.
I never expected anything.
I wouldn't have
like that to
either.
happen.
So what a blessing.
It really has been. Yes.
You bring up, I'm going to segue into the book now.
But can I go back?
Sure.
I'm sorry,
yes.
You asked me if there were some things that I could not attain.
Right.
One of them was the grand jury.
Okay.
I wasn't able to get any of the transcripts from the grand jury from Cathy's murder charges.
Okay.
Because after he murdered the second person,
yes,
they reopened Cathy's case, and he was charged with her murder. But it went to a grand jury, and I've tried several times, and they won't release that. They can't.
Oh, okay.
So that was, I wish that.
Yes, you might have been able to add more pieces to the puzzle, yes.
Well, there's one thing, the reason why I wanted to get that information, and that was within that grand jury, they revealed what Frank used to kill Cathy. That's what I wanted to get. Now, I have rumors, and I have that in the book.
Okay.
But I wanted concrete evidence.
Okay. All right. Well, what a disappointment. But nonetheless, the book is still good. Yeah. Okay. Something that you brought up, I'm going to segue into the book. Something that I thought that you brought up in the book was the fact that Cathy's brother has never been to the cemetery or the tombstone where she... To me, I'm not judging how people react, but I just thought that was somewhat odd. After all these years, he's never gone.
Well, here's the story on that. I interviewed her brother out in California. I think it was 2017 or 18, the winter. And I went to his home there in Southern California and interviewed him. And I asked him, when was the last time he'd been out to Cathy's grave? And he said, "I've never been there." And I said, "What?" Because he did say that he went to her funeral. Okay. And it was packed. It was a packed house. Now, I don't remember going. Okay. Neither does Mitzi, my twin, and neither does Leslie. Okay. But I do remember going to the Ward's house with Leslie's mother. She walked, Mitzi, my twin, myself and Leslie up there to give our condolences to Miss Ward. And I'll never forget sitting in their living room that day, but I don't remember attending the funeral. Yeah. But the funeral was an hour away. Her funeral was in Hot Springs. Her burial was in Murfreesboro in the cemetery, because that's the Ward family plot was there. That's where her father lived. And he said that he didn't remember ever seeing him. But then later in our interview, he retracted that. He said, well, maybe I did see it. He said, I went to my grandmother's funeral, and that was in 92.
Okay.
He says, I think I saw it then.
Oh, okay.
Well, yes, it's like 12 feet away from the big Ward monument is Cathy's little headstone. But then also, I'll tell you this, it's kind of funny that you asked that. He couldn't remember going to her grave. Well, after the book came out, Cathy's little sister was talking to him about the book, and she mentioned about his quotes in the book, and he said, I didn't talk to her. And she said, she interviewed you. He did not even remember me interviewing him out at his home in California. And I was at his home for about a few hours on a Sunday morning and interviewed him, and that was gone. But he's an engineer, and he was always kind of out there. And I want to give you a quote that that was in the book. It's right here. And this will kind of explain about him. He said, when I asked him how he felt when he learned that his sister had died, he said, I was sad, but don't remember crying. I was always pretty emotionally repressed and kept a damper on emotions all the time, so I can't say I felt a lot. So there's your answer.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Frank Davis is the major character in this book.
He's the villain.
Right. How would you describe him?
Okay.
And use as many adjectives as you want.
Well, I want to tell you about this man, because he was married 5 times, had 5 children by his last 3 wives. Okay. The first wife I could not locate. She was in Texas.
Okay.
The second one I could. Now, she was from Hot Springs. She was 12 years younger than him. But I did not interview her. I interviewed her sister-in-law because she didn't want to talk about Frank.
Okay.
That was another life as far as she was concerned. She had remarried, had a wonderful career and a wonderful life and a fabulous marriage, and she just didn't want to go there. But I did learn that she left him. And the first time she tried to leave him because she said he was insanely jealous and he would cry like a baby, but he was also very lovable. So there was 2 sides to him. But when she finally had enough of him, she tried to go the first time. He slit all the tires on her car. Well, the second time she did it when he wasn't home. Now, his third wife did the same thing, but this was after they were divorced. And I'm going to tell you about this because she was the same age as his second wife. They actually graduated in the same class at Hot Springs High School. Now, Frank didn't go to school in Hot Springs. He was in Texas.
Oh, okay.
He was 12 years older than them. He never went to school at Hot Springs High. But his second wife probably didn't know his third wife because they were from 2 different worlds. His second wife was in the rodeo club with him, and she could pretty well hold her own with him.
All right.
But the third wife lived in a really nice neighborhood. Her father was a dentist, and in fact, she lived across the street from the judge who ultimately presided over Frank's murder trial. But she was long gone from Hot Springs because when they were married, she told him, I'm pregnant. We're going to have our second child. And I don't know if you remembered reading this. And he said, well, tough. I have a girlfriend and she's pregnant and I'm going to divorce you and marry her. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Yeah. That's what happened. But as it turned out, his girlfriend wasn't pregnant. She was half his age. But he did divorce his wife. And the very day that the divorce was final from his third wife, he married his fourth wife, who was 19 years old.
Yes. Okay.
She was working at his mother's beauty salon. She had a beauty school, actually, and a salon. But he took his fourth wife up to Murfreesboro, of all places, and married her in Murfreesboro. And I thought, why did he go up there? If you're in Hot Springs, if you didn't want to get married in Hot Springs, why wouldn't you go to Benton or Malvern or Arkadelphia? He went to Murfreesboro. I didn't find out why until last year.
Which was?
And this was after the book was already published. They didn't have a waiting period.
Oh, okay.
I finally got his marriage license last year after the fact, but yeah.
Okay.
And the clerk up there told me in Murfreesboro, she said he probably heard from his attorney that we didn't have a waiting period, and that's why he came up here and they got married. And I assume they went back to Hot Springs. So that's the story on that. But he was a cad.
Oh, he was. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to speak for you in this sense. He murdered Sharon, his wife, fourth wife, and he shot his mother-in-law. I forget now, did she die or no? She didn't die. I didn't think so. Yes.
She didn't see very well.
Yes, yeah.
He hit her in the head, and she was in the hospital at Baptist. They brought her over here because they took Sharon to Washita Hospital in Hot Springs, and she lived an hour after she was shot. She was shot in the chest. And her mother came afterwards, and they immediately took her to Little Rock, and she stayed there after surgery, and they gave her a 50-50 chance for 72 hours.
Well, I remember you were saying in the book that Sharon got like a restraining order or something, but I may have misinterpreted, but it was like the police really didn't even try to enforce it, but he would just drive up and down the street. I'm going to get you. I'm going to kill you. And I just thought, and I know it's unfair, not all police act alike, but the first thing I thought of, it's so typical of the police, just who knows what would have happened had they enforced that rule. I felt so sorry for her,
I do too, but here's what was going on in Hot Springs. This was 1966. Hot Springs was coming off of the gambling era because the Vapors had closed, the gambling aspect of it, but they still had entertainment and such. And it was right before Rockefeller became governor in November of 66. Well, he immediately hired Colonel Lynn Davis, remember that? And he started raids on all of the clubs in Hot Springs. So the police were kind of going crazy in Hot Springs with all this gambling issue and plus there were brothels and there were lots of burglaries back then.
So obviously, what do you call it? Restraining order is not the highest priority. Yeah. Now that I've got a better picture, it helps explain.
Not Hot Springs at that time.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
No.
How would you describe the relationship between Frank and his mother, Irene? I thought you gave a good interpretation. I just thought it was not an odd, but I don't know. I don't have the correct word for it, but I'll let you speak. Yes.
Well, I think that his mother created a monster. Yeah. She did, because his father was a very strict disciplinarian. Now, Frank was an only child, and I'm not knocking singletons. They normally turn out to have a higher IQ, and they have other great attributes, but he was a terror from the very get-go. His parents lived in Texas when he was small, and his father had a barber shop, so he was busy there all day because they were in a booming oil town. And he set his mother up in a beauty salon, so Frank just roamed the streets of McCamey, Texas. He had a horse, and he was kind of on his own from a young age, but his mother just babied him. And it went through his adult life, because a person I interviewed said, oh yes, she bought him. He had over 25 to 50 horses that he stabled all over Garland County, and his mother paid for them all.
Yes.
And I know that you probably read the story about what happened after his fourth wife left him, only 48 days after Cathy died, about 48 days. Do you remember that story?
Go ahead. You tell me, yes.
Okay, about the cars. about all the cars that he bought in a week's time?
He bought quite a few, yes.
That came up in the trial.
Okay, yeah, his mother just seems to have just bankrolled him every which way she could, yes.
I think that she just threw money at him to just make him be quiet.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Now, you brought up something I thought was interesting, was the fact that, and I'm not quoting you directly, but in this interview, that he was an intelligent or something like that. But when he was in prison, I was amazed at, after he was in prison, he was just like some of these prisoners that are brilliant. They know every minutia of the law on how to manipulate it to their favor, and how he was able to work the system so that he could get out of prison. And it just amazed me, and it frustrated me to no end, you know.
One thing that I've told all the different book clubs and organizations that I've gone to, I said, people may think that Frank Davis was a ne'er-do-well. He wasn't. He had a college degree. Granted, it was in agriculture from a Texas university, but it was a 4-year college degree. He was a pilot, co-pilot in World War II, and he was later a crop duster. And he had different business ventures that, of course, his mother would bankroll. The man wasn't stupid.
No.
He was very brilliant. And I was fortunate to interview his son by his fourth wife.
Okay.
He was actually his fourth child. And he obtained his father's briefcase from prison.
Okay.
It was a hand-tooled leather briefcase that Frank Davis had made in prison, and it was stuffed full of documents and research and everything, and newspaper clippings and such, because his mother would goad him. She would send him newspaper clippings of different cases similar to his. A man in Benton did the same thing as Frank. He was divorcing his wife, and he said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Well, he did. But that man only got 5 years. So Irene wanted to find out who his lawyer was. She wanted to go after his lawyer to get him, but as it turned out, they didn't.
Okay. All right. Along those same lines is the trial itself. In the book, it seems like his defense attorney objected to so many things. And I thought, and I'm not criticizing your writing style, but I just thought, how did you get through reading all this? Because I'm not saying it was tedious, but I was just saying, I want to strangle this defense attorney because you had to bring it up to let us know what was going on. But how did it not wear you out or just make you go crazy with all the legal mumbo jumbo and all the technicalities and all the defense? I object.
Well, because I knew all the players.
Okay.
Now, Jack Holt Sr. was his attorney. His mother spared no expense on legal fees. She hired Jack Holt Sr. from Little Rock.
Okay.
Because have you ever heard of Jack Holt?
No, I haven't.
The whole family.
I'm not from here. So,
okay. Very well known. And Jack Holt had run for public office in Arkansas. Everybody knew him. He was very popular and charismatic and such. And he was his defense attorney in addition to a Hot Springs attorney, Robert Ridgway. But they did contest a lot, and they objected to a certain statute that the prosecuting attorney kept throwing in there and his assistant. But I knew all the different players, and I knew the prosecuting attorney, his assistant, and also the doctors that they brought in to testify whether Frank was sane or insane.
Yes.
That was the whole objection.
Yes.
Right there. And that was, but I know it had to be confusing, but you're the first one that's brought it up, to be honest with you. You really are. But
I think you did a good job.
I think people just kind of went over it.
Yeah. I think you did a good job, but it makes you wonder what it would have been like being in that trial. Okay. One last question I'd like to ask you. It's a little question. It's like you bring up, and because audiences will be watching this, they might think I'm a bigot. I'm not. You bring up the colored boy. And that was the term they used in the 1960s. So I'm not trying to be a bigot. But did they ever investigate the colored boy who was found murdered?
I'll tell you how that all came about, how I learned about that. When I was interviewing Dr. Ward in 2014, he's the one that told me about that incident. And he said, yes, that he murdered the boy, and that the authorities drained the pond, and there he was. Okay, but there's conflicting stories, because two other people I interviewed said, well, they said it was one of his ranch hands because they were all foster boys, so that may be true. But the timing's kind of out. But then another person online in a thread that talked about Frank Davis and Blacksnake Ranch and the murders and such said that she and her father were at the creek that was right there by Frank's ranch. And that someone came running down there and said, come help us, come out, help us. A young guy's drowned up here in the pond. And she said they went up there. Her father had been a tax collector in Hot Springs, the county tax collector. So everybody knew him. And that may have been why they hollered at him, because he was a familiar face. But they went up there to the house, and the lady said that she was a little girl, and she saw Frank Davis's wife was pregnant. And she was upset, and she wanted to take an aspirin, and Frank went all crazy on her. He said no and everything. And she said it was not long after that time that I learned that she had died. But the time period is out of sync, because she had her last child with Frank in March of 1966, and Cathy died in June, and the little boy would have drowned sometime after Cathy's death in June 24th. So that didn't fit, but the way I confirmed it was through an editorial that I found in the Sentinel Record, where the editor was passionate about a story about Frank Davis, and that's where he mentioned it, and that was my proof. So that's the only evidence I could give about that drowning.
This has been fabulous. I really have enjoyed it. Now, Biddy, tell the audience where they can find you in social media, and also how, if they want to buy a copy of this book, how can they buy it?
Thank you so much for asking that. I'm on Facebook, Biddy Martin Author, and I have a website, biddymartin.com. My books are at Books A Million, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. Wordsworth had it.
Okay.
But you can go online and get it at Amazon or at any. I heard that Barnes and Nobles had it here in Little Rock, out in West Little Rock.
Okay.
My brother saw it out there, and I was so happy to hear that.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Derek. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in reading Snake Eyes by Biddy Martin, you can check it out from the library or purchase it wherever books are sold. You can also find more information at our website, nlrlibrary.org. Join us again next time, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.